The sirens were off, but the engine was still running, and the boy's scream had already stopped. The parking lot behind the rec center was silent, except for the crunch of gravel under a police officer's boots, pacing slowly away from the scene she'd just created, face blank. Hand still resting on her belt. Her name was Officer Reynolds, mid-30s, uniform tight, hair buzzed sharp above cold, judgmental eyes. She hadn't just arrested him. She had slammed him down elbow first for resisting. But there were no drugs, no threat, no weapon. Just a 15-year-old boy holding his backpack too slow. And now that boy lay curled on the asphalt, his arm twisted unnaturally, jaw clenched to hide the pain. No one else moved. The other two officers stood off to the side, silent, watching, complicit. They didn't help. They didn't step in. They didn't stop her when she forced his wrist the wrong way, even after he said his name twice. Luca Statham. Didn't matter, not to her, because she didn't hear names. She only saw what she wanted to see, and what she saw was a skinny brown-skinned boy with a black hoodie in a quiet neighborhood at dusk. Not a victim, not a child, just a problem. Across town, Jason's phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a message, 3 words. No punctuation. It happened again. He was already moving before he finished reading. No weapons. No team. Just a switch inside him that flipped. Not rage, not panic, just clarity. Because Luca never texted like that unless it was real. And Jason had taught him one thing above all else: never raise your voice. Raise your awareness. By the time Jason pulled into the gravel lot, the ambulance had just left, but the officers were still there. And Reynolds, she was leaning against the hood of her cruiser, laughing with one of the paramedics. Jason stepped out of his car. No rush. No threat. Black jacket, heavy boots, empty hands. He didn't look at her first. He looked at the chalk marks on the pavement where his son's backpack had landed, where the blood had pooled, just a few small spots already darkening. His jaw didn't move. His breath didn't change. But something behind his eyes shifted. Reynolds looked over, didn't recognize him, didn't flinch. She asked if he was there for the kid. Jason nodded once. She said he was resisting, that he failed to comply, that she'd warned him 3 times. Jason asked if she had a body cam. She said it was charging. Jason asked if there was a warrant. She laughed, said they didn't need one for suspicious behavior. Jason didn't say another word, not yet. He just turned, walked to the passenger seat of her cruiser and placed a folded document on the dash. It was an authorization letter, signed by 3 city attorneys. It granted Jason legal power of access to all footage involving minor use of force incidents in the state. Because what Reynolds didn't know, Jason wasn't just a father. He was an active federal contractor for personal defense litigation, a man who had trained officers and hunted those who broke rules. Still, he didn't reveal it. He didn't need to. He just turned again and walked away. Not to leave, to check the center. Luca had already been taken to the hospital, but one of the staff, an older woman who saw the whole thing, was waiting by the doors. She was shaking, told Jason she tried to speak up, tried to ask questions, but the moment she did, Reynolds had threatened her with obstruction. Said she could be arrested too. Jason thanked her gently, then asked if there was security footage. She nodded, said the system was basic, low-res, no audio. Jason told her it was enough and asked for a copy, not to leak, to verify. That night he sat in his garage. The lights were off, only the glow of the footage on the screen reflected in his eyes. He watched it 5 times, each angle, each movement. Reynolds never gave a warning, never called for backup. Just grabbed Luca's wrist, twisted, slammed him sideways into the ground with enough force to fracture bone. Luca didn't resist. He backed away, open palms. Jason saw the pause the moment Luca tried to explain, then the hit, the drop, the broken arm. At 2:42 a.m., Jason made one call. Not to the precinct, not to a lawyer, to an old friend, Naomi Takahashi, former internal affairs agent now working private intel. He told her the situation, didn't ask for help, just asked for one thing: history. She delivered by 7 o'clock a.m. Reynolds had 3 prior complaints, all closed due to lack of evidence. 2 were minors, 1 was expunged. Jason requested the redacted names. She told him to be careful. He didn't respond. That morning, Reynolds showed up to the station like it was just another day. Coffee, clipboard, stiff walk. She joked about the drama from the night before. Said the boy should be glad she didn't charge him. Said his dad looked like some kind of ex-military wannabe. She still didn't know who Jason was. didn't know what he'd done. Didn't know what kind of memory lives in the fists of a man who once spent 6 years embedded inside off-grid paramilitary circles. Didn't know she'd laid hands on someone who didn't just train to fight, but trained others how to know when not to. Jason wasn't at the hospital. He wasn't in court. He was 3 blocks from the station, standing at a coffee truck, plain, simple, waiting, because he didn't need a badge to expose someone. He needed timing, and the timing was almost perfect. Inside the station, Naomi's forwarded file hit the city server. It triggered an alert, an automatic notification to the police chief, a flag on Officer Reynolds' record. She was being reviewed, but the review wouldn't come fast enough, because Jason had already moved. Jason didn't confront her, not with volume, not with violence. He confronted her with presence. 2 days after the incident, Reynolds pulled into her driveway and noticed the camera above her garage blinking red. She didn't remember installing a new security system. When she checked the footage feed, there were no files, just a black screen. And a timestamp in white font, 3:17 a.m. The same hour Jason had made his call. She didn't sleep that night. She filed a report with her supervisor, said someone was tampering with her privacy. They shrugged, told her maybe it was a glitch. The next morning, her cruiser failed to start. Mechanics couldn't find the problem, but when she opened the glove box, there was a printed still frame sitting inside, a freeze frame from the rec center footage. It showed her hand twisting Luca's wrist, the moment right before it snapped. No words on it, no note. Just the truth, isolated in silence. She slammed the door shut and called dispatch, voice shaking, said she needed tech support. They told her someone had already flagged her car as under review. Jason didn't need a lawyer. He was building something stronger, pressure without sound. He didn't want Reynolds arrested, not yet. He wanted her exposed, and that meant letting the system squirm, letting the internal clocks start ticking. So while she panicked, he showed up to the hospital. Luca was still in a sling, elbow wrapped, painkillers keeping him steady. But his face didn't carry shame. It carried resolve. Jason didn't ask how he felt. He asked what he remembered, and Luca told him everything. How Reynolds hadn't asked a single question, how she assumed he was casing the building, how she cuffed him when he reached into his bag for his student ID, how the other officers said nothing. Jason nodded once, then gave him a flash drive, said if he wanted to, he could post the video. But Luca shook his head. He didn't want views. He wanted vindication. So Jason called Naomi again, told her to dig deeper, not just on Reynolds, on the 2 officers who stood by. Naomi found what he needed in under 2 hours. One of them, Officer Green, had a prior suspension for evidence tampering. Jason pulled that file, cleaned it, repackaged it, and mailed it anonymously to the Civilian Oversight Board. He didn't put his name on it. He didn't need to. The footage spoke for itself. The records backed it up. The silence around it, that was guilt, and guilt under pressure cracks. Reynolds showed up to the gym 2 days later. Not to train, to confront Jason. She found him at the back of a quiet urban MMA facility, wrapping his hands before sparring with a friend. She walked across the mat like she was still in control, told him she didn't appreciate the intimidation, told him she'd done nothing wrong. Jason didn't raise his voice. He simply turned, unwrapped his hands, and handed her a photo. It was from her academy days, a class shot in the back row, her beside a former officer named Keller. The name meant nothing to her, until Jason pointed to the corner of the photo, where the instructor's file folder had slipped into view, the name on it, Hyun Seok Min, Jason's mentor, a man whose legacy lived in every stance Luca used, a man who once trained military liaisons on threat recognition and restraint tactics. A man Reynolds had mocked in an old internal email, washed-up pacifist, too soft for field work. Jason still said nothing, but Reynolds remembered the email, and now Jason had the original printout. He didn't threaten her with it. He just tucked it back in his duffel and walked past. That night, her second partner, Officer Green, requested leave, said he felt targeted, said the precinct wasn't safe anymore. No one asked who was threatening him, because no one believed there was a threat. They just knew something was wrong, and Jason was done playing defense. He sent one more package to the city council, to the oversight board, to the media. It didn't contain the footage, it contained process. A step-by-step breakdown of Reynolds' actions, annotated, cross-referenced, sourced against department policy. Each movement matched to a timestamp. Each violation labeled. Each piece backed by law, no opinions, just sequence. By the time the press got it, they didn't need a headline. They just ran the timeline. At the next city meeting, Reynolds' name came up 5 times. By the third mention, her supervisor had stopped defending her. By the fourth, the mayor requested a full review. By the fifth, Jason stood up from the back row, not to speak but to leave. Everyone saw him. No one stopped him. No one needed to. Later that night, Reynolds returned home. She turned off all her lights, sat in the dark. Her phone buzzed once. No number, no text, just a photo. Luca smiling, wearing a clean new sling, standing next to a plaque that read, "Do not mistake silence for surrender." She dropped the phone and didn't sleep. The storm didn't come with thunder. It came with a press release. Short, measured, just a few lines on the city's official site, effective immediately. Officer Melissa Reynolds is suspended pending an investigation into misconduct during a juvenile arrest. No photos, no media frenzy, but the silence afterward was louder than headlines. Jason didn't react publicly. He didn't need to, because what Reynolds still didn't understand was that this was never about her, not entirely. It was about pattern. It was about men and women who wear uniforms like armor but use them like weapons, and Jason had seen it before. In other countries, in darker places, where power wasn't worn, it was wielded, and the moment Luca hit that pavement, something in Jason reset, not to rage, but to mission. At the station, Green folded first. He called internal affairs anonymously, then immediately requested full immunity. Told them there had been pressure to cover, that Reynolds was considered unquestionable because she had friends up the ladder. By the end of the week, his statement was leaked, and Jason wasn't even in the city. He was 90 miles north, in a forgotten building behind a retired training facility. He stood in front of an old wooden box. Inside, the files he'd kept sealed since his own discharge from special operations, not because of shame, but because some things should only be used once. He opened the box slowly, pulled out a silver-labeled drive, and plugged it into a laptop that hadn't been online in 12 years. What loaded? A complete case study, written by Jason himself, on strategic misuse of authority in urban spaces, footage, testimonies, diagrams, and a training module titled, "When Uniforms Replace Conscience." He uploaded it to one place, the training server of the police academy Reynolds graduated from. No name attached, no password required, just raw data. By the next morning, 6 cadets had resigned. Back in the city, Reynolds tried to file an appeal, said she was being unfairly targeted, that her actions were within protocol, that the arrest was legal. But the moment she walked into the hearing room, she saw him, Jason, sitting in the back row again, this time in a light gray suit. Not flashy, but sharp enough to make people ask who he was. Reynolds couldn't focus. Every time she looked at the panel of officials, her eyes drifted back to him, and Jason, he didn't speak. He just sat, hands folded, and watched her speak around her guilt. After the hearing, she stormed into the parking garage. Jason was already there, leaning against her car. She stopped, frozen. He didn't move, didn't smile, didn't threaten. He simply handed her one envelope. She didn't open it, she just held it, breathing hard. He said one sentence. Quiet, final. "I don't need you punished, I need you changed." Then he walked away. Inside the envelope, a second photo of Luca, this time in uniform, not police, martial arts, a black belt ceremony, his arm healed, his stance straight, his eyes calm. And behind him, Jason. Not in front, not beside, behind. The message was clear. You tried to break him and failed. 2 months passed, no media buzz, no courtroom drama, just system-level shifts, policy reviews, internal reshuffles, new community oversight, all without Jason's name ever being attached. But that was the point, because Jason didn't want attention. He wanted a future Luca could walk through without explanation. One afternoon, Jason picked Luca up from physical therapy. They didn't talk about the injury. They talked about rhythm, balance. How sometimes the cleanest strike isn't the one you throw, it's the one you don't. And as they walked past the rec center where it all began, Luca asked a question. "You think she ever watched the footage?" Jason said nothing, just nodded slowly, because the truth. Reynolds watched it every night, not because she had to, because she couldn't stop. Final scene. Jason stood at the edge of a quiet rooftop at sunset. The city stretched beneath him, not as something to fight but something to watch over. He lit a single incense stick, placed it beside an old folded ghee, one from his own childhood, and whispered a name not for Reynolds, not for the press, for the boy she tried to break and failed, Lucas' name, because now the world would know it not through violence but through legacy.